The gym echoed with the rustle of folding chairs and the chatter of seniors flipping through their brand-new yearbooks. The smell of pizza boxes, Sharpie ink, and sweat from half-played dodgeball games hung in the air, weaving together the strange energy of celebration and restlessness. The school year was nearly over, and Ridgewood High buzzed with the kind of relief only seniors understood. Amara Fields sat cross-legged against the bleachers, her camera bag beside her and a thick hardcover yearbook resting in her lap. Gold-foiled lettering on the cover read, "Ridgewood High, Class of 2024, all in, all proud." She traced the words with her finger, hesitating for a moment. She knew what pages she was on, or rather what pages she was supposed to be on. Senior portrait, photography club, homecoming court. She'd spent 4 years building her presence in these halls, not just as a student, but as a contributor, a leader. Her photo had captured hundreds of memories for others. Today was supposed to be her turn. She opened the book. Page by page, students flipped past her. She skimmed the activities section. Theater, student council, environmental club. Then came the art clubs, drawing, painting, photography. She paused. No photo. The section was there, but the group photo of the photography club, her club, was gone. She frowned, flipping back. Then, forward again. Maybe it had been misplaced. Maybe the layout got shuffled. She turned to the senior portrait section, finding the F names. Fields Amara wasn't there. Her heart skipped. She turned quickly to the homecoming court page. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Ben and Olivia smiled back in formal wear. Elijah stood on the end, beaming in his gold sash. Madison's crown sparkled under the camera flash. Every name listed, every face accounted for, except hers. Amara's name, her face, her role, were gone. She didn't blink. She just shut the yearbook and stared straight ahead, her mind trying to fill in a reason, a mistake, any explanation that didn't scream what she already feared. A few feet away, Elijah caught her eye and made his way through the crowd, holding his own copy. "Yo, you see page 84? He grinned. "They made me look good." Amara handed him her book in silence and pointed. He flipped through quickly. His brow creased. "Wait, where are you?" "I don't know," she whispered. He turned more pages, scanned twice. His face darkened. "You're not in it?" "Not anywhere." He looked at her, then the book, then her again. "Amara, what is this?" She stood up, her voice level. "I'm going to find out." The bell rang, releasing students for lunch, but Amara didn't follow the flow of feet heading toward the cafeteria. She walked straight to room 204, where the yearbook team had held every meeting, late night, and layout session, where she had poured hours into captioning photos and aligning spreads. Ms. Ellison sat behind her desk, sipping coffee and scrolling. Through something on her screen, her glasses rested low on her nose and her posture stiffened when Amara knocked twice. "Yes? I need to talk to you about the yearbook." Ms. Ellison smiled politely. "You like the cover? It's new this year. I'm not in it." Ms. Ellison blinked. "Excuse me? I'm not in the senior portraits, not in photography club, not on homecoming court." Ms. Ellison's eyes narrowed slightly. "There must have been a submission issue. We had some technical problems with late file uploads. I uploaded everything on time," Amara said, keeping her voice steady. "I was sitting right there, next to you. Well, we had to make cuts to meet printing deadlines. You cut me? It wasn't personal, Mara. Then why does it feel like it was?" Ms. Ellison set her coffee down. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "No," Amara said calmly. "I'm finally seeing it clearly." The hallway outside room 204 was quieter than usual. Amara walked out slowly, the yearbook pressed against her chest like a weight. Her feet moved, but her mind buzzed with one question. How does someone disappear from pages she helped create? She found Elijah leaning against her locker, his yearbook now closed tightly under his arm. His usual easy smile was gone. "What did she say?" he asked. "She blamed file errors, then deadlines, then told me not to take it personally." Shook his head. That's the most personal thing I've ever seen done in this school. I know, Amara replied. But I think it was always coming. They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of passing students surrounding them like static. Amara's locker creaked as she opened it, sliding the yearbook inside. She couldn't bear to carry it anymore. I need to talk to Hargrave, she said. Elijah didn't ask if she was sure. He just nodded. At the front office, the secretary offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You here to see Principal Hargrave? Yes, it's important. She tapped a few keys. He's free right now. Go on in. Inside, the principal's office was dim, the blinds casting striped shadows across the carpet. Principal Hargrave looked up from his desk, his glasses low on his nose. Miss Fields, he said, standing. Take a seat. Amara sat without speaking. I've heard there was some concern regarding the yearbook, he continued. My name was erased, she said directly. From the clubs, from homecoming court, from my senior portrait. He nodded slowly. I see. I was told it was a formatting issue. Well, I'm sure Ms. Ellison explained there were complications with the printing deadline. It's unfortunate, but these kinds of mistakes can happen. Mistakes? Amara asked. How many other students were accidentally removed? Hargrave hesitated. I don't have the complete list. I checked. Every other name is there, every other homecoming photo, every other club group. I'm the only one gone. He exhaled through his nose. Amara, I understand you're upset, but I would caution you not to assume intent where there may only be error. She leaned forward, her voice steady. Principal Hargrave, I've walked these halls for 4 years. I've kept my head down. I've worked harder than most. I have the best GPA in my department. I've won state awards for photography, and still I'm being erased from the one place I was supposed to be seen. He shifted uncomfortably. I understand your frustration, but I think it's best for everyone if we handle this quietly. You mean privately, she corrected. I mean without stirring things up, she stood. I think it's too late for that. After school, Amara sat in her room, staring at her laptop. Her walls were lined with framed photos. Portraits of classmates, sports teams, candid smiles caught mid-laughter. She had taken all of them, preserved everyone else's memories while hers were buried under excuses. She opened a new document. At the top, she wrote the word, erased. Then she began typing. It started with facts, dates, deadlines, submissions. But it quickly turned into something deeper. She poured herself into it. The hurt, the pattern. The way being the first at anything in Ridgewood came with a target. She wrote about the time a teacher told her she was articulate for a black girl, about being asked more than once if she was on scholarship, about watching herself disappear from spaces she helped build. She didn't cry. She wrote. The next morning, the blog post was live. Elijah helped her post the link on his socials with the caption, "This isn't just a mistake, it's a message, and we're answering it." By noon, the views hit $3,000 by cool. The final bell. It was 10,000. By nightfall, local news had picked it up, and Ridgewood High was no longer just a school. It was a story. The day after her blog post went live, Amara walked into school carrying more than just her backpack. She carried weight, a new kind. The kind that follows you through glances, through whispers that stop the second you step into the room. Students parted in the hallway like a tide pulled by uncertainty. Some looked away. Some looked at her too long. Most didn't know what to say, and so they said nothing. She overheard it, of course, the quiet accusations. It wasn't that deep. She's making a scene. This is going to ruin senior week. Elijah stuck close to her side. You good? He asked. I'm not sure what that means anymore, she replied. At lunch, she sat in the courtyard alone. Normally, her table was full. Club members, classmates, students who asked her for photo edits or college essay tips. But now, the table was a desert. Empty trays. Avoided eye contact. Ms. Ellison walked by, chatting with another teacher. Her voice low but sharp enough to carry. I told her it was a mistake. But, of course, now it's a race thing. Amara didn't look up. She clenched her jaw and stabbed at her salad. appetite long gone. That afternoon, she requested to speak at the next school assembly. She wanted the students to hear from her, not through rumors or reposts, but from her own voice. The reply came in an email from the principal's office. "We appreciate your passion, Amara, but assemblies are pre-approved and focused on school-wide celebration. This topic could be divisive. Let's preserve unity as we approach graduation." Preserve unity. She stared at those two words like they were ash. Unity had never required her protection before. Only her silence. She left school early that day. The moment the final bell rang, she walked past the lockers and out the front doors. Her phone buzzing in her pocket. Elijah texted, "Where you going?" She didn't reply. She walked to the library, her sanctuary before she ever had a title or a platform. Back when she was just a girl who liked stories because they made her feel seen. She pulled out an old Ridgewood yearbook. 1964. Thick, dusty, yellowed pages. All white faces. She flipped through it slowly. Pep rallies, debates, proms. Not one black student. Not one brown face. Not one name that sounded like hers. She wasn't angry. Not exactly. Just hollow. It felt like history was holding her hand and saying, "You're not the first and you won't be the last." That night, she received an invitation to the principal's office for the next morning. She arrived on time, wearing a plain black t-shirt with "I was here" written in white letters across the chest. Principal Hargrave sat stiffly behind his desk. Ms. Ellison was already there. "We've reviewed your blog post and the video," he began. "And?" Amara asked. Ms. Ellison spoke up, her tone clipped. "Amara, this is not the way to handle school matters. Publicizing internal issues only causes chaos." Amara kept her face calm. "Internal issues? You erased me from the yearbook. That's not internal. That's public. We've had alumni call the school. Parents have threatened to pull donations," Hargrave said, rubbing his temples. "This isn't good for anyone." "It wasn't good for me either," Amara said. But no one cared about that. Ms. Ellison folded her arms. "Let's be honest, Amara. You're not the only student in this school. And frankly, there were concerns about the quality of some of the content you submitted." Amara blinked. "What concerns?" "The lighting in your senior portrait was off. Your club photo was missing half the members. The homecoming layout was cluttered. We had to make decisions." "You mean you decided I wasn't worth the space?" Amara said quietly. Ms. Ellison shrugged. "Some people aren't that photogenic. You know how these things go." Something cracked inside Amara, not loud, but final. Like a thread snapping deep in the fabric of who she thought she had to be to survive here. She stood up slowly. "Thank you for your honesty." Hargrave raised a hand. "Now wait, let's not escalate." But Amara had already turned and walked out, her hands steady, her chest rising and falling with something that felt dangerously close to power. The whispers didn't stop. They just got smarter, softer. In the locker room, two girls muttered behind her only to fall silent when she entered. A boy in her physics class made a joke under his breath. Something about her being overrepresented for someone who's invisible. And every day, Amara walked the halls knowing she was being watched but never seen. What stung more wasn't the strangers. It was the silence of those who used to call her a friend. People she helped on homework. People she'd stood beside at rallies and fundraisers. They didn't call, didn't text, didn't speak her name. Even the teachers treaded carefully now. Her English teacher, once encouraging of her essays, stopped asking her to read aloud. Her counselor rescheduled her meeting due to unexpected obligations. Every room seemed to shrink when she walked in. Elijah stayed close, though. "Loyal as ever. You don't have to keep walking into this with me," Amara said one afternoon as they sat beneath the old oak tree behind the art wing. "You think I'd let you face this alone?" he asked. "You're getting iced out, too." Then, "I'll bring a coat. I don't care." She managed a small smile. That night, she pulled out her old notebooks, flipping through photos and quotes she'd once used for inspiration. One page stood out, something she had written after winning her first regional photography award. Sometimes the lens has to adjust to see clearly. Sometimes so do people. The next morning, she walked into the school office and handed the receptionist a typed letter. "I'd like to submit this for public record," she said. "It's a formal request for assembly time." The receptionist hesitated. "Principal Hargrave already denied your request, Amara." "This isn't a request. It's documentation." The woman blinked, took the letter, and said nothing more. By lunchtime, her inbox was full. Subject: "Assembly access denied. Please refrain from escalation." Another: "Let's focus on positive closure for the school year." And one more, from a teacher she trusted. "I admire your courage. Please be careful. They don't like to be challenged." Amara closed the emails, opened her camera app, hit record. She stood in her room, the sunlight catching the framed pictures behind her. "I wasn't going to speak again," she began. "But silence is what got us here." She spoke about what it meant to be erased, about being asked to stay quiet for the sake of appearances, about how exclusion isn't always loud, but always sharp, and how sometimes doing the right thing means being called the wrong name by the people you once respected. She ended it with 5 words: "I will not disappear quietly." By midnight, the video had hit 100,000 views. The following day, a local journalist showed up in the school parking lot. "Ms. Fields, do you have a comment?" She looked into the lens. "I have a voice. That's my comment." Inside the building, Ms. Ellison fumed. She called Amara into the hallway after class. "You're playing a dangerous game," she warned. "This isn't a game," Amara replied. "It's my life." "You're blowing things out of proportion. You think this is some kind of movement?" Amara took a breath. "No, I think it's a reckoning." Ellison's face tightened. "You'll regret this," but Amara didn't flinch. "You regret things when you've done something wrong." Later that week, the school board sent an official statement acknowledging the yearbook omissions and promising a review. No apology, no responsibility, just words with no weight. But it was too late for spin control. Media vans circled the parking lot. National outlets reached out. Alumni began posting their own stories. Former students, black, brown, queer, immigrant, shared memories of being sidelined, silenced, excluded. The truth spilled out, not in waves, but in flood. Amara didn't seek revenge. She sought truth, and as the story grew, so did her platform. A civil rights group invited her to speak on youth advocacy. A local college offered her a scholarship for media activism. She was no longer just the girl who'd been erased. She was the girl who turned her absence into a spotlight. The same students who once looked through her now looked up to her. But not everyone applauded. The backlash came, too, anonymously. Bitterly, "You're ruining our reputation. You just want attention. Why can't you be grateful?" And still Amara rose, not with rage, but with resolve. She didn't yell. She showed up. She didn't burn bridges. She lit paths. By the end of the month, the school board met in an open forum. Amara sat in the front row, wearing her homecoming sash and holding the original photo from the photography club. When it was her turn to speak, she walked up to the microphone and placed the photo on the podium. "I was told this was a formatting issue, but the only thing that didn't fit was me. I'm not here to tear anyone down. I'm here to make sure no one else is ever cut out without a fight." The auditorium was silent, and then, slowly, surely, it erupted into applause. Amara stopped, going to school events. The once vibrant calendar on her bedroom wall stayed blank, the colored stickers she used to love now untouched. Prom committee meetings passed without her. Club sessions came and went. And when the senior bonfire was announced, she didn't even blink. She wouldn't be standing around any more flames that burned her. Her social media went silent. No more posts of her photography, no updates, no replies. The girl who once captured light in every corner now avoided the spotlight altogether. Her inbox filled with tags and shares, some from people showing support, others from people asking why she was still making this a thing. Eventually, she just deleted the apps, Even her camera gathered dust. Art used to be her escape, her therapy, but now every click of the shutter felt like a lie. How could she frame beauty when she couldn't feel it? She sat at her desk, staring at the blank canvas of her sketch pad, pencil unmoving. Her fingers curled tight around it, but nothing came. Not even anger, just the dull weight of disappointment, deeper than rage, heavier than grief. At dinner, the silence stretched longer than usual. Her parents exchanged glances as she picked at her plate. "How was school?" her father asked gently. "Same," she replied. Her mother leaned forward. "Did you speak to anyone today?" "No," her father sighed. "Amara, you can't let this take your joy. It's almost graduation." "That's easy to say," she mumbled. "You're not the one being erased." "Ignore them," he said. "Keep your head down. Focus on the future." Her mother put down her fork. "No, Victor, she shouldn't have to ignore it." He looked up, surprised. Her mother turned to Amara. "You were named after your grandmother for a reason. You come from a line of women who didn't stay silent. You think Grandma Esther stayed quiet when they told her she couldn't sit at the front of the bus? Or when she had to teach 3 times harder for half the respect?" Amara's voice cracked. "I'm not her." Her mother's eyes softened. "You don't have to be. But you can't let them decide who you are." After dinner, Amara sat in her room, her fingers trailing the edges of an old scrapbook her mom had made years ago. Inside were photos of her as a child, smiling with missing teeth, holding a disposable camera on her first school trip, posing next to a trophy for her first photography contest. She turned the page, a newspaper clipping, a black and white photo of her grandmother, standing outside a courthouse during a 1963 sit-in. The headline read, "Local Woman Demands Equal Education." That night, Amara dreamt of flashes, her grandmother's face in a sea of strangers, cameras clicking, hands raised, voices rising. She woke up sweating. She opened her notebook, flipped past half-scribbled poems, half-started essays, until she reached a blank page. She wrote, "They tried to erase me. But I'm still here." At school, Elijah noticed the shift. She didn't smile more, but she stood straighter. "Glad to see you again," he said. "I was always here." He walked her to class. "You ever gonna talk to Hargrave again?" Shook her head. "He already showed me who he is." "What about Ellison? She's not worth the breath." They passed a group of students laughing by the lockers. One of them nudged the other and whispered something as Amara walked by. Elijah turned, but Amara touched his arm. "Don't. Let them stay small." In English class, the teacher assigned a reflective essay. "What defines you?" The prompt, "Read on the board." Most students groaned. Amara picked up her pen. She wrote one sentence. "What defines me is that I refuse to be defined by others." Later that week, she found herself in the library again. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the books. Maybe it was the memory of safety. She wandered to the archive section. Her fingers ran along the spines of the old yearbooks, dust rising as she pulled one out. 1961. The pages felt like history's breath. Cheerleaders in plaid skirts, pep rallies in the gym. Faces of students lined up in perfect rows, all white. She flipped to the administration page. White principal, white staff, white smiles. Her throat tightened. She flipped to the end. Class of 1961. We were here. Were they? Because none of her family would have been. She pulled another yearbook. 1975. Still almost entirely white. It wasn't just that history repeated itself. It was that sometimes it refused to change at all. She closed the book softly, but the message stayed loud in her chest. On her walk home, the breeze pushed at her back. Not forcefully, but steady, like a hand guiding her forward. Amara sat at the edge of her bed that night, the overhead light off, her room lit only by the soft orange glow of the street lamp filtering through the blinds. The house was quiet. Too quiet, she used, to love the stillness, how it gave her time to think. Now the silence only seemed to echo louder inside her. She picked up her sketch pad again, flipping to the page where she had written, "They tried to erase me. But I'm still here." Her pencil hovered over the next line. Still here. Still standing. She began to draw. At first, her lines were faint, uncertain. A face, her own, but older, wiser. Standing beneath an oak tree, with roots stretching deep, underground. In the tree's branches, she added names: her mother, her grandmother, her aunt, her great-grandfather. The trunk bore scars, not as flaws, but as stories. She stared at the image, feeling something stir again. Not anger, not pride. Fire. In the morning, she walked into school earlier than usual. The halls weren't full yet, just a few scattered students and staff. Ms. Grant, the librarian, gave her a warm smile as she entered. "Couldn't stay away from these books too long, huh?" Amara smiled. "They don't talk back." She walked past the main collection and into the back, where the archives were. This time, she didn't pull out. The oldest yearbooks, she pulled out the last 10 years. Slowly, carefully, she laid them out across a long table and began flipping. In each one, she looked for patterns. Whose faces showed up over and over, whose didn't. What names were misspelled. Which clubs got 2 full spreads and which got half a page shoved in the back. She took notes, names, trends, omissions. Her findings weren't just personal. They were proof. By the time Elijah joined her after first period, she had pages of data laid out like evidence in a courtroom. He whistled. "This is..." "Wow." She didn't look up. "It's always been like this. We just didn't want to see." "Dooney," he pulled out a chair beside her. "So what now?" "We make them see it too." That afternoon, Amara drafted an open letter. But not just from her. She gathered names, students who had similar experiences, teachers who whispered quiet, support, alumni who'd messaged her with stories of being left out or overlooked. The letter wasn't angry. It was honest. It began, "We are the students who weren't asked to speak, the faces that were cropped, the names that were mispronounced, the ideas that were dismissed. We are not figments. We are not exaggerations. We are here, and we have always been here." She attached the data she had gathered, the patterns across years, and the screenshots from her own erased content. When she posted it online, it wasn't just a blog post. It was a record. It went viral overnight. The next morning, the local paper ran the headline, "Students Speak Out Against Years of Yearbook Erasure." A state representative retweeted it, calling it a brave reckoning. Ridgewood High issued a statement through the district office, promising an independent review of publication practices. Ms. Ellison took a leave of absence. Principal Hargrave declined to comment, but Amara didn't wait for them to speak. Instead, she organized a lunchtime panel with students, held in the library. Dozens came, some out of curiosity, some out of courage. She opened it by holding up her sketch pad. "This is my family tree," she said. "It's not perfect. It's not neat. But every scar tells a story. Every branch stretches back to someone who didn't quit when it got hard." She paused, looking out at her classmates. "I wanted to be remembered for what I built, what I created. But now I understand. It's not just about what we leave behind. It's about who we lift up while we're still here." When the final bell rang that day, a younger student approached her in the hallway. "I'm in the poetry club," he said quietly. "They left us out of the yearbook, too. I thought maybe it was just us." "It's never just you," Amara said. "But it doesn't have to stay that way," he nodded. "Thank you." That night, Amara returned to her camera for the first time in weeks. She picked it up, adjusted the lens, and took a photo of her sketch pad lying open on the table. Her family tree etched in pencil, a ribbon of her grandmother's photo taped to the corner. She uploaded it with a new caption. "They planted me. Shadows, hoping I'd wither, but I learned how to grow anyway." The first word she typed was the hardest. Erased. That was the title. Nothing more. Nothing less. It echoed in her head as she stared at the blinking cursor, heart heavy with the weight of everything that had led to that moment. But once the dam broke, the words flowed like water rushing through. Cracks that had been spreading for years. She wrote late into the night. She described the moment she opened the yearbook. The sick feeling in her stomach, the wave of confusion, and then the certainty. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a glitch. It was a choice. She talked about how silence had followed her since she arrived at Ridgewood High. The polite exclusion, the passive-aggressive dismissals, the subtle undermining of everything she worked for, and then she named it. Racism that hides in clean fonts and cropped pictures. When she finished, she hit post. She expected it to sit unnoticed, a ripple in a sea of noise. But Elijah had other plans. The next morning, he met her at her locker with his phone already recording. "I'm telling your story," he said. "They can delete your pictures, but not your voice." She hesitated. "Are you sure?" He nodded. Always. They filmed a short video in the art room, a place that had always felt like theirs. White walls, paint-streaked tables, her voice, low but strong, filling the silence. She read the opening lines of her blog. Then she looked straight into the camera. "This is what erasure looks like, but I refuse to vanish." They uploaded it to TikTok and Twitter before first period. By third period, it had 8,000 views. By lunch, $50,000. By sunset, over 250,000 comments poured in. "Same thing happened at my school. I thought I was the only one. Your courage is changing the game." Screenshots of other yearbooks started surfacing. Clubs of color cropped out. Black students misnamed or misplaced. A wave of voices broke loose, and Amara found herself no longer alone. Local news stations picked up the story. Journalists reached out, but one name stood out: Talia Green, a young black reporter known for her fearless community coverage. Talia's email read, "Amara, your story is important. If you're willing, I'd like to help you tell it fully and truthfully. I promise." "To do it justice," Amara agreed. They met in the public library where Amara felt safest. Talia brought a small camera crew and a notebook full of questions. For the first time, Amara spoke not just for herself, but for every student who had ever been overlooked. Talia asked, "What do you want from this?" Amara didn't pause. "I want them to admit what they did. I want every student who was made to feel invisible to know they're not." By the time the interview aired, Amara's blog had been shared by authors, educators, and even a few celebrities. The video reached 500,000 views. Her follower count exploded. But it wasn't the numbers that moved her. It was the DMs. A student from Kentucky, a girl from California, a teen from Michigan, each with stories that sounded just like hers. The more she read, the more resolve grew in her. She hadn't caused the fire. She had simply refused to hide the smoke. By Monday, the school's tone changed. The district issued a statement acknowledging oversight and unintended exclusion, though no names were mentioned. It felt sterile, insincere. The next day, Principal Hargrave called her into his office. She walked in with her chin up, the hallway now a tunnel of silence and eyes. Hargrave stood, straightening his tie like it was armor. He gestured to the chair, across from him. "I want to apologize," he said. "Things got out of hand. Amara didn't sit." "You mean the truth came out?" He sighed. "We're prepared to reprint a limited batch of yearbooks with your photo and credits properly included." She blinked. "A few copies?" "For those directly affected." She let the words hang in the air. "So the problem isn't what happened? It's that people found out." He looked flustered. "We just want to move forward." She stepped closer. "You don't get to erase someone, then hand them a bandage in private. This doesn't need to go further." She squared her shoulders. "You're right. It needs to go higher." He stiffened. "What exactly are you hoping to achieve?" Her voice was clear. Not silence, not sympathy, just acknowledgement. She walked out without shaking his hand. That night, she posted again. This time, it wasn't a video or a blog. It was a single sentence. They offered a fix in secret. I asked for truth in the light. The district office had no choice but to schedule a public forum. The auditorium buzzed with students, parents, and local reporters. Folding chairs lined the back wall. Some teachers stood silently in corners. Ms. Ellison wasn't there. Neither was the usual nervousness in Amara's chest. Talia sat in the front row, her notebook in hand. Elijah gave Amara a quick nod as she stepped onto the small stage where the microphone waited. The superintendent cleared his throat and motioned to her. "Miss Fields, you have the floor." She approached the mic. No notes, no speech, just truth. "When I opened that yearbook, I didn't expect to find everyone. I just didn't expect to find myself missing." A hush fell across the room. "Didn't plan to become a story, but being erased made one for me. So I chose to finish it on my own terms." She scanned the crowd. Faces were watching, some supportive, some wary, but she stood anyway. This wasn't about a photo or a page. It was about being told without words that I didn't belong in the story this school tells itself. She let that land. I don't want a quiet fix. I want change that doesn't hide. I want other students now and next year and 5 years from now to know they matter before they disappear from a page. She stepped back. The silence stretched long, and then applause, slow, then growing. When she returned to her seat, Elijah squeezed her hand. "You just lit the whole room up." The following day, the district board issued a revised statement, a full reprint of the yearbook, with Amara's contributions restored. Not hidden copies, official ones, distributed to every student. They also announced the formation of a student-led diversity and equity committee. Amara was offered the chair. She declined. Instead, she nominated 3 younger students, each from marginalized communities, and said, "Let them start their chapters. I've told mine." Still, her story traveled. The erased blog post was republished in Teen Vogue. Her video was screened during a national youth conference on education equity. Talia's feature aired on local and national channels, and Amara's inbox continued to flood with messages. But what moved her most wasn't the fame. It was the day a shy freshman girl stopped her in the hallway, clutching a camera just like hers. "I joined the photo club because of you," she whispered. "I thought I didn't belong here, but you showed me that I do." Amara knelt down and smiled. "Keep your lens on truth. That's where the power is." At home, she sat with her parents at the kitchen table as the story played on the evening. Her father finally spoke, voice soft. "You didn't just make us proud, you made us whole." Her mother wiped away a tear. "You stood taller than they expected." That night, Amara pulled out her camera one more time. Not to capture others, but to capture herself. She looked directly into the mirror, clicked the shutter, and smiled. Not for anyone else's approval, but for the girl who had never stopped. Showing up, the next morning, the school lobby featured a new display, a tribute to student voices through the decades. And at the center, framed in black and gold, was a photo of Amara Fields, captioned with the words she'd chosen herself, erased, but never gone. Amara stood backstage, hands lightly shaking as she clutched the folded email printouts in her palm. The stage light spilled across the television set in shades of blue and gold, but the weight pressing on her chest wasn't about the lights or the camera. It was about the truth she was about to share. For weeks, her voice had been traveling, through hallways, phone screens, and social media feeds. Now it was time to speak it where the whole nation could hear. The host smiled gently as the segment rolled live. "Tonight, we are honored to speak with a high school senior whose story sparked national outrage and hope. Amara Fields, thank you for joining us." Amara offered a small nod. "Thank you for having me." They began with surface questions about the yearbook, the missing pages, the online post. She answered with measured words and deliberate breath. Her voice never rose, but it never wavered. The pain was there, but so was a deeper power, one shaped by weeks of humiliation, reflection, and awakening. Then came the shift. "I understand you've come with something to share," the host said, tilting her head toward the folded pages in Amara's lap. Amara straightened. "Yes, what happened at my school wasn't just neglect. It wasn't a printing error or an oversight, it was intentional." She unfolded the emails. "These were sent to me anonymously. They're real, and they're from people who were supposed To protect students like me. Her hands didn't tremble as she read aloud. One email refers to me as the girl with the megaphone we don't need right now. Another says, make the fix before it turns into a social media circus. And one, her voice caught just for a second before hardening again. One joked that removing me from the yearbook would be cleaner optics. The host sat stunned, silent. I didn't come here to attack individuals, Amara continued. I came here to reveal a culture that calls silence safety. That rewards invisibility over truth. That tries to erase people not because they're wrong, but because they're inconvenient. She folded the papers slowly. I'm not here to be convenient. The clip exploded across the internet. It aired on the news that night and replayed for days. Hashtags surged. Support poured in from celebrities, journalists, and school leaders across the country. But behind the applause was a reckoning. Within 48 hours, the district issued a new statement. Ms. Ellison was placed under formal investigation for misconduct. Principal Hargrave was placed on administrative leave pending a review. The IDER School Board announced an independent audit of all administrative communications and student representation policies. Words that once felt impossible to imagine now took up space in emails and newsprint. Systemic exclusion, institutional bias, restorative justice. But Amara wasn't finished. The district organized a town hall meeting to address the growing outcry. Students, teachers, families, and media outlets packed the auditorium. Some came with questions. Some came with doubt. Most came with hope. Amara waited behind the curtain, notebook in hand. She had been asked to speak first. Elijah squeezed her shoulder before she stepped onto the stage. They tried to dim you, he whispered, but you became the light instead. She walked out, heartbeat steady. The crowd fell silent as she reached the microphone. She didn't wave, she didn't smile. She opened her notebook. I wrote something, she began, her voice clear but low. I call it, You Can't Crop Me Out. She read it slowly, each line pressing into the air like a truth too long buried. I am not a blur at the edge of your lens, not a shadow made smaller to fit your frame. I am color and contrast, and focus and flame. You can't crop me out. Not now, not again. She looked up briefly, locking eyes with her classmates. I sat in your classrooms. I learned your history. I memorized the pledge and wore the mascot shirt. But you flinched when I led, smiled when I stayed quiet, and still I showed up. Her tone didn't rise, but her strength did. You narrowed the shot. You trimmed the truth. You clipped my name. But I am still here. She paused, letting the silence carry the weight. You can cut the image, but not the impact. You can cut the credit, but not the contribution. You can cut the face, but not the fire. The final lines came soft and searing. You forgot one thing. I never asked for your permission to exist. I belong in the frame because I helped build the picture. She closed the notebook, placed it on the podium, and took one step back. Silence. Then one woman stood. A teacher. Then a second. A student. And then, like waves breaking open, the entire room rose. No one clapped. Not yet. They just stood. The applause came after, thunderous, lasting. And Amara stood in it, finally uncropped, unfiltered, undeniable. In the days that followed, Amara's voice stretched further than she ever imagined. National networks picked up the story. Civil rights attorneys and youth activists called her courageous. Old friends she hadn't heard from in years reached out with messages that said, You're making history. Still, none of it felt real. Not until the school board sent a formal invitation asking her to attend the next meeting as an honored speaker. Not a student, not a protester, a speaker. She walked into that meeting dressed in quiet defiance. Her shirt read, Seen. Her hair, full and free, was no longer pulled into a bun to make anyone comfortable. She wore no makeup, no armor, just herself. That alone was a statement. The auditorium was packed again, this time with TV cameras lining the back wall. Reporters scribbled in notebooks as board members filed in one by one, their faces stiff with polite caution. Ms. Ellison was not present, Principal Hargrave was nowhere to be seen. The silence surrounding their absence was loud. Amara was called to speak near the end of the agenda. She didn't wait for applause. She walked to the microphone and took a long pause, letting the quiet fill every inch of the room. Then, with steady breath, she began. When I was younger, I believed schools were where you learned who you are, where you grew, where you belonged. But somewhere along the way, I realized they also teach you how easily you can be erased. She looked directly at the board. This wasn't about a missing photo. This wasn't about formatting. It was about someone choosing to erase a person who didn't fit their version of pride. And when you erase one voice, you teach 100 others to stay silent. There was no trembling in her voice, just depth. I'm not angry because I was left out. I'm angry because you taught every other student watching that power means erasing the truth instead of facing it. You taught them that their stories only matter when they're easy to digest, that their differences are dangerous unless watered down. She stepped slightly forward. But I'm here to remind you and them that visibility is power, and I will not apologize for being visible. She then reached into her bag and unfolded one final paper. Not an email, not a photo, a letter, typed, signed, verified. I received this from a retired alum who once served on this very board. She wrote, "In 1965, I watched our school erase the black students who desegregated our classrooms. I never thought I'd see it happen again." A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. "This isn't just about me," Amara said again. "It's about how many of us you've taught to shrink, and how many are finally done shrinking." The moderator thanked her and gestured for her to return to her seat. But before she could move, a teacher from the audience stood and asked to speak. "I was in the room when the yearbook pages were finalized," the teacher said. "And I didn't say anything. I told myself it wasn't my call, that it wasn't my fight, but it was." He turned to Amara. "You were right to stand, and I was wrong to sit." More voices followed. A parent shared how her daughter had also been left out of a science award photo last year. Another student stood and shared how her LGBTQ+ club was labeled non-essential and omitted altogether. Amara listened to each voice, not with pride, but with quiet understanding. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about every story that had waited too long to be told. Later that night, as the crowd thinned and the reporters filed their last quotes, the superintendent approached Amara with tears in her eyes. "You didn't just speak," she said. "You rewrote what accountability looks like." Amara didn't respond with a speech, just a nod. A simple one, because it was never about speeches. It was about being heard. The following week, the school board passed new policy revisions. All yearbook and media content would now be reviewed by a student-led inclusion council. Ms. Jennings, the advisor who once stayed silent, resigned. A new advisor was brought in, one of color, and for the first time in school history, they announced a town-wide exhibition titled "The Voices." We almost missed. Amara was invited to headline the exhibit. She didn't submit photos, she submitted her poem. And next to it on the wall hung a photo of her that had been cropped out of the original yearbook, now restored, full frame, untouched. That image, Amara smiling wide in her photography club shirt, surrounded by the team she led, became the new face of the school's diversity initiative. On the morning of graduation, Amara walked past the office bulletin board. A sign read, "Thank you, Amara, for refusing to be erased." She didn't stop to stare. She didn't need to. She knew the work was only beginning. As she sat on the field in her cap and gown, she looked around at the crowd. There were classmates who once doubted her, now wearing pins that read, "You can't crop me out." There were parents with signs. There were teachers with changed eyes, and then she saw Elijah, grinning. "You good?" he mouthed. She smiled. Better than good. When her name was called, the crowd didn't just cheer. They roared. She walked across that stage not just as a student, but as a symbol of what happens when someone refuses to be small, when someone tells the world, "I will not disappear quietly." And as the sun hit her skin and the tassel brushed her shoulder, she whispered something to herself. They tried to write me out, but I wrote myself back in, and this time, in bold. A month had passed since Amara stood on that town hall stage. What started as a local scandal had become something far bigger, an awakening. Her name was now familiar in households that had never heard of her school. She was invited to speak at a national youth leadership summit in Washington, D.C., surrounded by other changemakers. She wore the same shirt she'd worn the night of her poem reading, Seen, except this time it wasn't about defiance. It was about being recognized on her own terms. Back home, the school finally reprinted the yearbook, but this time, it opened. With a full-page story about Amara, her activism, her voice, and the story that couldn't be cropped out. Her senior photo was there, bold and bright. So was the club photo, the homecoming court portrait, and a copy of her poem. She hadn't just been restored, she had been amplified. The district created a student-led diversity task force with actual decision-making power. Amara helped build its foundation, but she declined to lead it. "Make room for someone who hasn't had their turn yet," she told them. That alone became part of her legacy, lifting others as she climbed. Teachers began reshaping their curriculum. One classroom hung her poem on the wall. Another asked students to write their own uncropped truths. Her story became required. Reading in the local civics classes, taught not as controversy, but as courage. Letters began arriving at her doorstep, not just from colleges, but from girls in other towns who saw themselves in her story. "You gave me permission to speak," one wrote. Another read, "I thought I was invisible until I saw you stand." One envelope had no return address. Inside was a short note. "You reminded me who I once was. Thank you for the mirror. A teacher who's learning again." Colleges reached out not just for her GPA, but for her grit. "We're not offering you a scholarship just for what you've achieved," one counselor told her, "but for how you made others believe they could too." She chose a university with a strong journalism program, where she planned to study media justice. But before she left, she launched a digital publication for students of color. She called it Uncropped. Its tagline read, "We don't fit in frames, we break them." On the night before her move, Amara sat on her porch, the summer breeze threading through her curls. She opened her journal and wrote the final reflection of her high school years. "They thought if they left me out, I'd fade. But being unseen taught me how to speak louder. And when I told the truth, clear, calm, and proud, the world didn't just listen. It remembered." And with that, she closed the page, not the story, but the first chapter of many.